Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Elfreth. I have the great privilege of representing Maryland's 3rd Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives. That's Anne Arundel, Howard, and a little bit of Carroll County. And I'm so thrilled to bring to you our first town hall. We're doing it at a slightly odd time for a town hall, but we wanted to make sure we brought you experts who could speak to this moment. We have received thousands of phone calls from across the 3rd Congressional District from constituents who are understandably anxious and confused about what is happening, particularly coming from the White House and DOJ. And so we wanted to build a town hall where we could actually answer your questions. And so that's what today is all about. We received hundreds of questions in advance. We're going to take a couple of live after we get through a few of them first. But please, if you're watching live, you can comment in the chat with your name, the town you're tuning in from, and your question. And I'm going to jump on in because we have a couple special guests with us. First of all, my partner in Anne Arundel County in the Maryland delegation, Congressman Steny Hoyer from the 5th Congressional District. Thank you so much, Congressman Hoyer, for being with us. We also have President and CEO, special guest today of Democracy Forward, Sky Perryman. Under Sky's leadership, Democracy Forward has expanded the scope and reach of its work, emerging as a nationally recognized institution that's taking on the most significant issues affecting people, families, and communities, from defending our civil rights and fair wages to seeking to expand reproductive health care post-Dobbs and confronting attacks on education and so much more. And we're also so excited to be joined by Rob Shriver, who is also with Democracy Forward, but he previously served under the Biden administration as the acting director of Office of Personnel Management. So these are our leading experts who can answer most of your questions today on what is happening here in the 3rd Congressional District, Maryland, in the country. I'm going to start by just asking my partner in this work, Congressman Hoyer, if you have any opening words for us.
Well, Sarah, thank you very, very much. The reason you're doing this, the reason I'm joining you is because the federal service, the best civil service in the world, literally, has been put into crisis and chaos by the actions of this administration. And in particular, at the hand of Russell Voigt, who is now going to be the OMB director and who has said he wants to so dispirit federal employees that they do not want to come to work and that he wants them perceived as villains. This is unprecedented, unacceptable, and the very way to destroy the efficiency and effectiveness of government that DOJ so claims to be a proponent of. So I am very pleased that Sky Perryman and Rob Shriver is here because they know what they're talking about. And Sky, thank you so much for planning for and executing such a good offense or defense, depending upon how you want to look at it, in terms of this illegal activity being pursued by this administration. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Steny. And Sky and Rob, we're going to get to questions in just a second, but if you want to share anything else about this moment, I know both of you spent a lot of time in courts lately. Anything you'd like to share at the top?
Well, I think what we want to make sure everybody here knows, you've got members of Congress that are working every day for you, and you've got lawyers that are working every day and night, literally. I'm in a hotel room right now. We've got cases all over the country, but literally day and night, that are not going to let the American people's well-being, all of our ability to thrive, to be able to craft a future for our families and for our communities. We're not going to let that go down without a resounding voice and a resounding fight in the courts and communities and throughout the country. And so we are really honored to get to do this work on behalf of millions of people that represent the best of America. And it has also been an honor at Democracy Forward to have Rob Shriver join us, who joined us at 12:01 on Inauguration Day, right after finishing a very demanding job leading the Office of Personnel Management, because we knew when we saw Project 2025 that this administration was going to come in and try to undermine the very people that serve all of us and that have made us great and that continue to make us great, the U.S. Civil Service. And so Rob has been such really a dedicated, servant of the people, especially here at Democracy Forward in these last few weeks, as we have been trying day and night to respond to the triage of crises that we know that many of you are facing and that many Americans across the country are facing, because 85% of the federal workforce, of course, is outside of the DMV area. But Rob, I don't know if you want to say just a few words before we get into a discussion.
I'll just say real quick, it's my honor to be here and to be working with you, Sky. Thank you, Congresswoman Elfreth, for bringing us all together. Congressman Hoyer, I know you go back some 44 years working for federal employees. My career is about 30 years long, and I've spent the entire time just about working for federal employees. And I wish that the folks in the White House and with DOGE would just sit down and talk to some federal workers, because I don't think they understand what federal workers do. I know that we have all talked to federal workers over the many years here of our careers. And what I know about federal workers is they leave their politics at home. They show up and do the job day in and day out, no matter who's in charge. And they care deeply about the mission of their agencies and just trying to help make things better for everyday Americans. That's what they do. That's what motivates them. And so it's rather not only discouraging, but heartbreaking to see them being villainized, to see them being tormented, and to have them try to be driven out of the jobs that they care so deeply about. So I'm really honored to be with all of you and to be part of Democracy Forward and to lead our Civil Service Strong initiative. civilservicestrong.org is the website where federal employees can go and get information and resources about what's going on and how they can get help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sky and Rob. And the reason that Congressman Hoyer and I wanted to bring these two experts forward is because collectively we represent 120,000 federal workers in the 3rd and the 5th congressional districts combined. And these are folks at the United States Naval Academy, at FDA, at Social Security, at NIH, at so many federal agencies that impact the lives of every American. And so when we talk about federal employees, we're talking about services to every single American. And that's what makes this fight so important. I also just want to say that Congressman Hoyer and I have been meeting with your labor or union leaders constantly over the last 2 weeks. We've stood with you at rallies. We were just at USAID last week and Social Security on Monday, AFG this week. But we're also busy in Congress. We are filing legislation to attempt to put a stop to this, but we are also, as Democrats, in the minority in Congress, and that's why it's so important that we support these actions like Democracy Forward, like the unions in the court system. That third check and balance our Constitution empowers us to have, and that's why we wanted to focus on this today. So first question came on the federal employee issue. It actually came from Linda in Severn, who wants to know what advice is being given to federal employees right now. And I'll just add an addendum, particularly after last night's ruling from the judge in Massachusetts. Can you all just set the stage for folks listening right now?
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about last night and the fork in the road situation, and then we'll let Rob talk about some of the resources and advice available to civil service through our just tremendous project, Civil Service Strong, that Rob is the managing director of. So the administration is seeking to engage in a shock and awe approach to really hollow out our civil service. I just want to acknowledge we see that. We know that we're going to fight every day in the courts. And I know your Congress people are going to fight every day in Congress to prevent that from happening. But it's a broad brush approach. And there are not a lot of words for comfort. There are words for resolve and for courage and for moving forward. And that is what we are seeking to do. So the first thing the administration did was send an incredibly, I think, disrespectful letter acting like civil service was something that can be bought and sold on Donald Trump's market, as opposed to the honorable service that so many people provide, 2.2 million civil servants provide throughout the country, offering a quote unquote buyout. That buyout offer, just to be clear, is something that Congress has not appropriated funds for. And it is something that the terms of the offer raise a lot of concerns for many people that have looked at it, including multiple state attorneys general and other legal experts have said, proceed with caution. It also put a really tight fuse on the time to consider whatever it was, if it is a valid offer. They wanted everyone to have to consider things by February 6th. And so our team on behalf of unions went to federal court 2 times. We were able to obtain court orders that extended that deadline so that people just were trying to take it all in, didn't feel like that they were totally up against a wall. And then yesterday, the judge issued an order that will allow that buyout, quote unquote, to not be paused anymore. That was actually the same day that the administration paused the buyout offer. So I'll just say that the court had extended some of the time. The offer was there until yesterday. Only about 75,000 federal employees took it. Many federal employees, I think that we've all been hearing from, saw it for what it was, which is something that was concerning. It seemed very one-sided. It seemed very unfair. It's really unclear if there's even money for it. And we know that, more than 100,000 people retire from the federal government every year, and then 250,000, I think, leave federal service every year for other reasons. And so, just to say that it didn't get the big uptake that I think the White House was hoping. The question now, though, is really what else is out there and what else can we do, at least in the courts, which is one of the front lines. So I'll talk about that. Then Rob can talk about some other resources that are available. Large scale initiatives like Schedule F. We have filed 2 lawsuits. There are 2 other lawsuits pending. There are multiple lawsuits filed in the court on that. So we'll have to wait and see how the courts deal with that. We think it's very unlawful and we think it's harmful. Large scale operations like Doge. We sued Doge on the first day of this presidential administration, as did many other groups. And we didn't even know at that time the contemplated harm that it was seeking to provide. And we have multiple lawsuits now pending against its operations. So those are the types of things happening in the courts. Many of the things that they have done with a broad brush, saying that they're putting folks on leave that are part of particular programs, we were able to stop and pause the leave with respect to the USAID last Friday in a court action. We have lawyers in court today on that. Those types of things are just quite, they're unlawful, they're broad brush, and there's many problems with them. And we're going to try to get as many of them stopped as possible in the courts. Rob can talk to you about what resources are available for individual civil servants who may find themselves in a situation where they've had an adverse action taken against them by this administration, because there are individual rights through the Merit Service Protection Board, through the MSPB, as well as other options that are available. So Rob, do you want to talk a bit about those resources?
I'll just hit on them real quick, Sky. First is, if you're in a bargaining unit represented by a union, that should be your first stop. Reach out to your union rep. If you're in a bargaining unit, check and make sure you're a dues paying member, because I think it's important to support the unions that are representing you and on the front lines of these fights with your dues. Secondly, the Merit System Protection Board has an appeals process for individual employees who are subject to impermissible, illegal, adverse personnel actions, such as removals, demotions, suspensions. There are law firms that specialize in that kind of work. And we have resources on civilservicestrong.org that can help walk you through that process. And thirdly, there is the Office of Special Counsel, which exists if you're subjected to a prohibited personnel practice, which would mean something that's not a termination, but other actions that are illegal, including whistleblowers and whistleblower retaliation. And we also have a lot of partners like the Government Accountability Project, Project on Government Oversight, that specialize in protecting whistleblowers. You can find their information through civilservicestrong.org as well.
Excellent. That's a great resource that we're going to link in the comments as well for folks to take home. And in our post email, we'll also have all these links available to folks. We've gotten a lot of questions over the federal funding freeze issue. And a couple of questions, Manung from Elkridge, a lot around from nonprofits, but also folks engaged in really critical public health initiatives.
Yep.
So he's concerned about the freezes at CDC and NIH. We just got a question live. Brian works at University of Maryland, Baltimore on NIH research grants. Everybody's afraid of these freezes. What can you tell us what's happening in the courts right now?
Well, our team, the minute that the administration abruptly went out and said that it was going to freeze essential services. I mean, that is what the funding freeze was. It was a freeze of essential services, services like the ones you all provide, services like Meals on Wheels, Head Start, so many things that our communities rely on. We were in court less than a day after they said it and before the freeze was supposed to take effect, although we know that funds were frozen. We obtained court orders and continue to have court orders on that. We know and are monitoring that there are some people still without funds, and encourage you to reach out to us at Democracy Forward. You can go to democracy2025.org, which is another resource page we have to reach out. You can let us know in any way. We are monitoring that, and we'll continue to fight in the courts to keep the funding freeze unfrozen, to keep it blocked. The NIH situation was another sort of page out of the same playbook to try to weaponize resources that really should be available for all of us and for our futures with this administration. That there's been two court orders that there have been two court orders that have been issued to pause that funding freeze as well. And it should be that if you're at universities and you're on NIH research grants, you should be getting your funding. And again, we would ask that you reach out if you are not. There are a number of other ways that this administration is going to try to weaponize the people's funding, the people's money, and we are prepared as our coalition to fight those in court as much as possible. There's been a number of cases filed on USAID. Like I said, we were able to get some limited relief, at least on the personnel side, last week. Some are asking, what can you as an individual do? And there's a lot that you can do. You don't have to be a lawyer suing on it to do these things. We need to make sure that stories are being told about what this funding supports. It's really important. And by the way, many communities, I grew up in a red state. I grew up in Waco, Texas. Many communities that are in the deepest red states are really suffering as a result of these funding freezes as well. So it's really beyond politics, and we need to encourage people to speak out about it. But we are pleased that the courts are the front lines stopping this, but there's a lot of work to do, and it takes a lot of resources to continue to be able to get into court quickly.
And actually, my staff is writing a note to me right now that NIH just this morning put out a memo admitting the funding freezes are illegal because, again, they've been appropriated by the Congress, which has the power of the purse. So we're going to link that memo as well. This is the power of not doing it by telephone. We can give you all these links live right now. The memo reveals, and I'm reading this live, the agency has been in violation of these orders for almost 2 weeks. And so this is a tool that members of Congress could have, that Steny and I have. While we are in the minority and we do not have the ability to bring a bill to the floor without our Republican colleagues seeing the light, we can raise these issues, support groups like Democracy Forward in the courts. We can listen to your stories. We will take your phone calls, but this is going to be a team effort here. It's not Congress alone that can save us. It's a group effort here. I want to move on, unless Mr. Hoyer, you wanted to jump in on, you've been an appropriator for the majority of your career in Congress. Any thoughts on federal funds here?
Well, no, I think clearly you've said it. Much of what they've been doing is illegal. They've been told it's illegal. They don't care that it's illegal. They're continuing to try to intimidate administrators, federal employees, and the bureaucracy itself. So that we just need to keep on fighting. But these questions are good. Let's let the experts speak to them.
Okay, so next is Julie from Crownsville is asking, I think the $1 trillion question here is, what is the plan to enforce the court orders that are being issued into compliance? What happens if this administration does not comply with those court orders? She's writing to us from a small nonprofit in Baltimore that uses USAID funding for important humanitarian work. What can you share about what happens next?
Yep. So here's a few things. Number one, I want to emphasize something that the Congresswoman said that is really important to know. Many of the things that they're doing, Congressman Hoyer said this too, are unlawful, but more importantly, they know they're unlawful. And the minute that you push or get a court order, they sort of kind of back up a bit. Now, I'm not being overly optimistic or rose-colored glasses, but I think it is important for everyone to know that there are concerted efforts to make you think you don't matter and that your voice does not matter. And it does. And we see it every day, especially in these legal disputes, where they often will admit and then back off while things are pending in the court. So that's just the importance of staying vigilant. The second thing is we are using the courts to ensure that people are obtaining the relief that we can get. So we are right now reporting to the federal courts about what the government's compliance with respect to funding. You saw a federal court have to call the government on the carpet in another case around the funding. And that is something that has effect. And it is something that it's important to remain vigilant, that the courts do have the ability to hold attorneys in contempt, to hold parties in contempt, to take disciplinary action. Now, here's the other question. What happens if we really get to a situation where even if the courts are doing that, the administration still operates sort of undeterred, right? And completely ignores court's orders? That will be a constitutional crisis. In our Constitution, there are 3 branches of government, and it's not just the judiciary that's in charge of checking the president. It's also Congress. And so these are opportunities for members of Congress, including members of Congress on the Republican side. And you did see some already come out and say, we believe court orders should be enforced to really push and use that check and balance system. And I know that that the congressional members that are here today will certainly be pushing their Republican colleagues to do that. But I just want to be clear, that is where the checks and balances work, but it's not just one branch checking a runaway executive, it's both. And we really think this is really important, the judiciary, and then of course, Congress itself and the interplay there.
Sarah, let me make a point. Yesterday, we had a hearing in the Labor Health Appropriations Subcommittee, and the hearing was on community colleges. Essentially, across the board, Republicans and Democrats were supportive of community college efforts. But the point that we made was we have a constitutional crisis. We have an administration that says they may not follow the law. We have a civil service in chaos, which is very early on and right now having adverse effect on the American public that the Congress wants served. So that we made the point, that's what we ought to be having hearing on. That's what we ought to be addressing. The Republican members who control the House ought to be having hearings in which we will participate in trying to check the administration from the illegal activity that it's pursuing. So all of us need to be urging the Congress to conduct the oversight that is its constitutional responsibility and that the founding fathers had in mind when they created the Congress and the checks and balances between the executive and the Congress.
I couldn't agree with you more, Congressman Hoyer, and that's where we need a few brave members of the Republican Party to join us in exercising that oversight capacity, and we're working hard on that every day. We just have a few more minutes left with Skye and Rob before they, I'm sure, have to get back into a courtroom somewhere. But we have one question from Laura. We got this live. It's concerned about our immigrant community. With so much chaos, the birth rate executive order, there's tremendous confusion in our communities. Families afraid to send their children to school. What can you tell us about your actions in court right now?
Well, we're in court in Maryland, federal court in Maryland, as we speak, around the just abrupt policy that the administration put in that seeks to enable ICE to enter houses of worship. We're there on behalf of the Quakers. We're there on behalf of the Baptists. We're there on behalf of the Sikhs, and we'll see how that court rules there, because we do believe it's unconstitutional what they've done. But let me just take a step back and say many of the attempts that they are making to curtail immigration, to target and erase people, are completely unlawful. Every federal judge that has considered their so-called birthright citizenship executive order has said it's unconstitutional. The president doesn't get to, with the stroke of the pen, redefine the rights of the American people, and that includes people who might not have. That includes people who have immigrant backgrounds. It includes residents that are here in the United States that might not have been born in America. So there are a number of organizations, including ours, that are working on this every day. If you would like to keep up with how the legal challenges are going, a great resource is democracy2025.org, which outlines everything the president has done and where the responses are. And so you can follow and track those. And then you can also sign up for updates. But I will say, in the same way that we were talking about some other communities that are really deeply negatively affected. We and so many others are going to fight every single day in court. And I know your members of Congress are going to do everything they can, but we also don't want to take away how, deeply troubling this is and the fear that people have. And we want to be in community with you about that, as we're also seeking to fight for your rights. So please keep up with our work, and we'll be sending that out as well. And know that we believe and know that the people have the power. The reason this president had to disavow Project 2025 on the election trail is because conservatives, liberals, and independents all reject the extremism that is in that playbook that they're now seeking to accelerate. And I find a lot of hope in that we can leverage our voices and our power, both in the courts and outside.
Thank you so much, both of you, for taking time out of your tremendously busy schedules to be here. We appreciate you. You're welcome to stay on, but I know you also have to run. Any closing thoughts for us?
I have to run out. Yeah, I will run, but thank you. It's an honor to get to be here and to get to hear from folks in your district. Please have us back. We'll be keeping you updated on the work. And thank you for all that you're doing in Congress. We got to get some of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle to decide that they're going to fight for people too. But I do think that the administration's overreaching. Rob, I don't know if you're able to stay on a little bit longer in case people have questions, but I will let you all go.
Thank you, Skye.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay on,
Okay.
Congresswoman, and answer any further questions. I would like to at some point address some of the conversations about waste, fraud, and abuse that are occurring in the chat.
Yeah.
Before you do go to waste, fraud, and abuse, let me say something about the last question. The administration is violating the constitutional and legal rights of American citizens. It's no doubt that they're not worried about violating the rights of others who happen to be in our country, many of whom are here legally, and some are not here in an authorized fashion. But the fact of the matter is, we are seeing an administration who does not care what the law is. They have an objective, and they're prepared to achieve it legally or illegally. And that's why we all have to be so attuned and fighting back and telling us your stories. And that's what I want to urge everybody. Yeah. Tell us your stories. Tell us how it's affecting you. Tell us how affecting the people you serve as a federal employee.
Thank you, Congressman. Rob, I'd love for you to address these allegations of waste, fraud, and abuse, and perhaps a better way to exercise oversight and auditing than what is occurring from DOJ.
Yeah, thank you. So, look, I don't think anybody is going to deny that there is some waste, fraud, and abuse that goes on in the federal government. And I was proud as OPM director to work to close over 200 recommendations that we had outstanding from the IG and the Government Accountability Office to put millions of dollars back into people's pockets. And so if this administration really cared about addressing waste, fraud, and abuse, I think you start with talking to the federal employees that know the steps that could be taken to help with that. I think you put your political appointees through the background investigation and security clearance process, which is meant to make sure that folks aren't subject to blackmail or have conflicts of interest with their business interests or are foreign agents, which are all like areas that are rife for waste, fraud, and abuse. And then lastly, you wouldn't fire all of the inspector generals across the government, including many that you appointed into those positions when you were in power before. So how can you be claiming to be really driven by concerns of waste, fraud, and abuse and fire the very people who are put in place to identify that waste, fraud, and abuse and hold agencies accountable for addressing it?
In violation of current law, without giving the Congress 30 days to react to those illegal, in this case, firings. We have a question from Kathy in Millersville. And Congressman Hoyer, this is a great question for actually both of you, because I think it speaks to the intersection of what happens when we have fewer federal employees able to execute services. Kathy wants to know, how worried should I be about continuing to receive my Social Security checks and Medicare? Is it possible to be cut off with no notice? I'm losing sleep over this.
Well, if it was cut off, that would be illegal. If in fact they reduce the Social Security complement of personnel to a point where it is impossible to service on a monthly basis the Social Security checks, you ask me, is it possible? it is possible. However, we're going to fight very hard that doesn't happen, that somebody who's relying on a Social Security check on a monthly basis is not without that check. And that's the problem that the Trump administration is pursuing, that Musk is pursuing very vigorously without any study of the ramifications of their actions. Every citizen ought to know that. They have no idea because they sent out a blanket notice to every federal employee. Now, they withdrew that and the courts intervened. But the fact is, they sent out notices without having the faintest idea what the ramifications would be to average people, whether they're veterans getting checks, veterans getting service, Social Security receiving checks, healthcare services being delivered in our hospitals or by researchers in NIH, people who are delivering nutritional services to people, Meals on Wheels and things of that nature. They had no idea, and they sent out a notice and said, you can all leave. Now, very frankly, the federal employees had the good sense not to all leave, because if they had all left, America would find very quickly how much they rely on the services of federal government employees on a daily basis.
Right. And thank you for that. I have another question for both of you. Mary Angela from Mount Airy, from Carroll County. Thank you, Mary Angela. Asks, what is the Democratic representative's plan and strategy for negotiating the fiscal 2025 budget before March 14th? Is it possible to avoid a government shutdown without giving up all the Democratic caucus's budget priorities, which, Mary Angela, I would include Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid is hugely important for our neighbors in Maryland, not just folks on low incomes, but significant seniors. Over 660,000 Maryland children rely on Medicaid for their health coverage. So this is a big deal. And we're in the midst of negotiating this budget as we approach March 14th. But we're going to be standing up for our priorities as a party, but not just as a party. Our priority is as people who represent districts that rely on these essential government services. Congressman Hoyer, if you have any thoughts there.
Well, let me just add, first of all, the biggest problem of reaching an agreement is the Republicans cannot agree among themselves. And that's been true for the last 2 years of this Congress. Understand that the budget should have been adopted on September 30th. Now, we usually haven't done that, unfortunately. We should. But it's usually gone as far as December. But in December, in the past years, we've adopted what we call an omnibus appropriation. The Republicans refused to do that this December, and they went in, so they set a March 14th date. The problem is, at this very point, 30 days or less than 30 days before we should have an agreement, the Republicans have not even agreed on the number.
Right.
That is the number that they want to spend right now, 30 days before, among themselves. So forget about negotiating with Democrats. They haven't agreed themselves. And until they agree on what they can agree on, we can't make an agreement. But they cannot do, demonstrably, they have been not able to pass fiscal bills on their own because of their deep division and dysfunction. So I'm hopeful that in the next few days, they will agree. They'll look, this is the number we can agree on. And then we will negotiate on that. We've already made an agreement. Understand, we made an agreement on this budget. And the Republicans have decided to walk away from that agreement. So they want us to make a new agreement. But before we can make an agreement, of course, you have to have a party decide, this is what I want to ask for. And they haven't decided that even at this late date, 5 months after the fiscal year started. Right. So hopefully we can get there. We don't want to shut down government. But the Republicans, I will tell you, have had a history of shutting down the government, starting with Newt Gingrich and moving forward under the Trump administration and under the Bush administration. So I'm hopeful that doesn't happen. It's very, very detrimental. People think it's detrimental to federal employees. It is. But even more importantly, it is detrimental to the operations of government and the service it performs for the American people.
Absolutely. And we did get a sketch of an idea yesterday that includes $2 trillion in cuts while simultaneously expanding our debt ceiling by $4 trillion. And so it's a little difficult to understand or appreciate fiscal conservatism when we're asking to decrease services to the American people, yet increase the debt ceiling by $4 trillion. These are all things are related. The budget negotiations, President
Sarah,
Trump is.
let's point out though, Sarah, we did get a sketch. It was from one group of Republicans. It was not from the Republican Party. It was not from the leadership of the Republican Party. It was one faction said we could do it this way. Well, of course, there are a lot of different ways we can do it, but until they decide what their position is going to be, we know what our position has been going to be. We made an agreement: 1% increase in the defense spending and 1% increase in non-defense domestic spending. That's much lower than is usual, but we're in a time where you have to make an agreement. So we've agreed on that, even though we thought that was too low on food for kids, Head Start, medical costs, et cetera, et cetera. But that was the agreement. So we're ready to stick with it.
Right. Exactly. Mr. Shriver, I do want to give you a question. We got a little bit of an outside the box question. Vandalier from Columbia comments that there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation right now running rampant. Columbia, Maryland. Yes. Howard County. What would you recommend as a good source for our constituents to go to get reliable information? Again, we're going to include all the links that you've recommended to us, but what do you read in the morning when you wake up?
Yeah, I think it's a big problem because, the Office of Personnel Management traditionally has been a very nonpartisan agency. Most of the people there work on processing retirement benefits or working on the federal employee health benefits program for feds health insurance. And so to see what it's been turned into under this administration really has kind of cast doubt on the veracity of the information that OPM is putting out. And so organizations like mine have been trying to respond in real time with what the real scoop is on civilservicestrong.org. And so that's a place that you can go and get those kind of resources, and you can submit questions, and we can update our Q&A to try to help get you the real scoop. I have some folks who are experts in this field that work with us on that. I think the mainstream media is starting to catch up a little bit. I think the word is getting out that the impact on the American people of what is happening to the federal workforce is a real story here. And so I'm always looking for that when I get up in the morning, is who is covering that this is not just about federal workers, although federal workers are so core to who I am, but it's not just about federal workers. And the federal workers would tell you that, because what they exist to do is serve the American people. And so as I see the coverage of stories that take that angle and start to explain to the public the impact, those are most important. And I think when federal employees are asking what they can do, helping to get that story out about the impact that they have and their jobs have on American people is really important.
I couldn't agree more. Let's talk about the FAA and aviation security. Let's talk about USDA and food inspection. Let's talk about NOAA and weather predictions. I mean, this is really going to have an impact on across the board. Congressman Hoyer, I know you have to leave in just a minute. Any closing thoughts for us? I'm going to stay on to answer one more question, but I want to thank you for your time.
Well, look, Sarah, I thank you very much. Let me tell you, Sarah is a fighter, and that's what we need, fighters. We need people who get the information, know the information, involve experts like Ms. Prettyman and Mr. Shriver, and energize their constituents. We all need to be fighting this battle. It's not just the members of Congress. It's not just federal employees. Frankly, everybody who relies on federal employees on a regular basis for one thing or another ought to be contacting their member of Congress. Frankly, not because it's partisan, but because the reality is the members who are allowing this to happen are the Republican members of the Congress, or known as Trump's party. So that if we all get involved and we all keep our eye on the ball and raise these issues, hopefully democracy will work. Hopefully the representatives will hear you as we are listening to you, and will act in consistent, not with your interests. Surely I want them to do that, but with the interest of the American people and of our country. Let me tell you, they sent notices out to every CIA agent, secret agencies overseas who are trying to protect us from additional attacks from outside enemies. That was not rational. That was not consistent with America's interest or the interests of the American people. So we're going to keep fighting, and we're going to raise our voices every day. I get up every morning, I read the articles about what the administration has proposed and what impact that is having on the federal employees. And I get my staff together and say, okay, we got to respond. Sarah and I talk about it every day. And you talk about it every day. And I am very worried about your health, your psychological health, and why any personnel manager would say to his or her employees, I hope you don't want to come to work. I think you're a villain. That's insane for anybody who's seeking efficiency and effectiveness of a government that is needed by our people. So thank you for fighting. Thank you for getting on this program. And Sarah, thank you very, very much. And Rob, thank you for the work that you're doing. And I look forward to seeing you and talking to you later today and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow until we get this fight won. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steny. Thank you.
You bet. Bye-bye.
And Rob, I'm going to take one more question. And I've gotten this question probably 3 times an hour since the inauguration. But Jan from Annapolis asked it really best. She said, as a Democrat constituent living in Maryland, a blue state, what is the most helpful action I can take to show my disagreement with the current administration and help overturn some of these actions? We've heard a lot of people, they're calling my office, thousands of phone calls. They're calling Steny's office. They're calling our senator's office. There are only so many things I'm allowed to share with you from an ethics perspective while I am sitting in the House of Representatives, while I am communicating officially as your Congresswoman. So I have to be very choice with my words, but I'm going to say this. As Steny said, we need to keep hearing from you. If you've called my office, thank you. But I'll just share a quick history lesson. In 2017, the last time that President Trump tried to come for Medicaid, come for the ACA, we saw real grassroots organizing in districts across this country, districts that did not necessarily look like mine, reaching out to their members of Congress, making their voices heard. It's imperative that every one of my 434 colleagues hear from their constituents, just like I am hearing from you. And so that is the advice I can give to everybody here. I like to say in my office, as I have the Naval Academy's slogan across from me on a flag from my desk, don't give up the ship. But this is going to take some concerted effort, some concerted organizing. Mr. Shriver, I'm so grateful that you took the time. Again, I don't think you've slept since you joined Democracy Forward. I'm grateful for you. Every member of Congress I've spoken to is so grateful for you. Any closing words before I close this out?
Yeah, thanks for that opportunity, Congresswoman. And it's really my pleasure to join these sessions. I got to be the champion for federal employees as the OPM director, and this gives me a chance to talk to feds who are going through really tough times. I think the message that I want to say is this doesn't need to be a partisan issue. And I think that what people can do is just have conversations with their friends and families about what the impact is of the federal government on communities across the country. You know, I would say like there's a legitimate debate to be had about the size of government, what's the most efficient use of government. There are procedures to have those discussions. There's a budget process. You know, the Republicans control the White House, they control the Congress and the Senate. And I would say like that's where the people's representatives get to debate these issues. To have sort of these meat cleaver approaches that are being taken without a clear strategy for how the federal workforce is going to be able to continue to deliver essential services to the American people, that's where sort of the emotional reaction comes in, because it's not right. People are going to suffer. Federal employees are being tormented in the meantime. I think federal employees, like, they get it. They understand that priorities change and sometimes budgets go up and sometimes they go down, and there might be a reduction in force. And that's okay because there are ways to go about that to make sure that everybody feels like they're being treated fairly and to make sure that, there's a plan to continue to deliver
Right.
important services to the American
Right.
people. So my message is this doesn't have to be a partisan issue. This should be an issue that we all care about
Right.
and that we can have that debate while also not just tormenting federal employees and destroying things that are going to really hurt the American people.
Thank you, Rob. I couldn't agree with you more. I am waiting every single day for a plan, and not this arbitrary kind of capricious and sometimes cruel executive orders and work that Doge is doing. Again, there is no strategy. It doesn't feel like there's a plan. And Congress, especially House Democrats, are waiting for it, ready to engage in a serious conversation. But that's not what's happening right now. Now, folks, I want to thank you for taking the time to tune in. This is going to be live, available for folks who weren't able to make it. We're going to continue our Sarah Explains It All series. You're going to hear next about Medicaid. I'm joined by my colleague, Congressman Sarah McBride from Delaware. We also put a resource guide together for you, and that's available at elfreth.house.gov. We'll also include, again, in the comments, links to the sites that Rob mentioned. You can continue to follow the work that we're engaged in, from filing legislation and showing up to rallies and being in the district. All the tools I have at my disposal in the minority party, I am using every single day, but I still need to hear from you. So you can follow us at Rep Sarah Elfreth. And then we're going to continue to have these town halls in different formats. You're going to see us in person. You're going to see us on the telephone. You're going to see us streamed. We're trying to be everywhere all at once, all the time. But it is a great privilege to represent you in the House of Representatives. Despite the chaos of the moment, I feel very grateful for this opportunity to continue to be your voice here in Congress. Thank you for tuning in. Rob, thank you for being with us. Thank you to Democracy Forward, and thank you to Congressman Hoyer. And thank you to all for taking the time. See you soon.